see the guy going almost against the fence. When you mow something, you're maintaining it. They use that now for soccer nets and everything to store their soccer nets in that cleared area. So I just don't know how, and even kids can play there. When the game's going on, some of the little kids run right up to the fence because there's nothing there. So I just don't know how they can do this. I mean, I just heard something about a tree massacre and everything, and there's fines for doing that. I'm pretty sure there's an undisturbed ordinance, that 50-foot undisturbed you put. So I would like somebody just to look into it. But I want to make sure everybody knows what I'm speaking about here too. And this has never been about the what, okay? I don't know anybody in the neighborhood that doesn't want these kids to play, that doesn't want these kids to have fun, the best. And if you can afford it, I don't care that you want to have rubies for bases. I don't care. You should have it. But the problem is you've got to be able to be responsible for it. And this group does not share that responsibility. My concern is this has always been about the how. And that when you get into how, when you get into the what, it's more mechanical of building and putting things in. The how is behavioral. And that's how they treat us. So these kids, I think, should be able to play, but you shouldn't be able to play on top of us without them taking the appropriate responsibilities. Now, as I understand it, to get to this point, before they even got this, I mean, at the very beginning, this was zoned, what, R27, R something like that, high up. It was supposed to be larger homes, bigger property, okay? Well, we dropped that down to, and went to give it to them. Now, when we did that, we lost that tax revenue. I don't know, I think I saw something that this was around $7 million estimated value. I don't know what those homes would have been, 5, 10 million. I don't know what they would have gone. If they would have gone, they would have made that. That's tax revenue not only we lost, but everybody in Matthews has to pay for now because they don't pay taxes on this. So I just want you to keep that in consideration, that we, the people back there, are the ones paying more for the streets, paying more for the schools, paying more for the police, so these kids can play. And I don't mind it if they play responsibly, if they can set them up. You just can't set these poor kids up on top of people and expect them to be quiet. They're out there to have fun. They should be yelling and screaming. But all right. Real quick, I'm going to try to wrap up.
Maybe we can wrap it up at this point.
Okay. The only other thing that irritates me, and it makes me feel better watching this meeting. But the last meeting that we had on this, where you approved, I didn't see any of you add any value. You listened. You heard both sides. You went in. You pontificated. You did not add value. We sat there when we asked and said, how can you put people that close screaming? I don't know. It was on there. You made no changes. But at least I'm hearing that you're looking to work something out here. So let's remember, I'm just asking you to remember that on this list, you also support these people. I want everything Covenant Day should be able to have what they can have. But these people also you support. So I strongly recommend that you oppose this and any future rezonings until they have corrected their problems existing on their current field. Why would you give them more? They don't take responsibility for what they have. So I thank you all.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in support or opposition to the application? One thing I do want to clarify is that this zoning is to change the property from R20 and B1CD to an RICD. RI is our recreational institution zoning. At the time that, residential institution. At the time that the trees were cleared, the property's R20, it's still R20 because the ordinances allowed that to occur on that property. So this board did not have any ability to control what was going on out on that property. We since have changed that, and this zoning application is coming in to change it to the R1CD or RICD. But I just want to make that clear that we never went through a rezoning on this piece of property. This is the first time this has occurred. We looked at site plans, we approved site plans, but there's not been any zoning. So, but that opportunity is here at this point. So thank you.
Mr. Brown would like to respond to some comments.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We agree with you on the history of the rezoning. There's a lot to unpack in those comments. I'm not going to get into that, but I will say our takeaways are we're going to look at noise limitations. We'll talk with your staff and our team about that. Limitations on the vehicular access. I think the connectivity is important, but I think that it can be limited to address the concerns. And then we'll continue talking to your staff about a greenway and where it's appropriate. I'll let Mark Davis close.
Yeah, just a couple things. I wasn't here 8-9 years ago when the property was developed. I do want you to know that as the neighbors have presented concerns to me, I've responded to all of them since I've been in my current position, and I'm glad to continue to do that. And I appreciate, and we even mentioned that when we had the immediate neighbors to the church, let them know that I certainly understand some of the noise issues as they brought to my attention. The seating actually is 1,500 that we've proposed in the plan, not 2,000. I wanted to mention that as well. Also, the road behind that baseball field, we're not wanting that to be for through traffic. We're concerned about what would happen with the North Carolina Department of Transportation at that intersection of 51 and Monroe, and if we can't make that U-turn, that buses from opposing teams would have to go down the street and park in that area that we've talked about earlier, and to be able to get an opposing bus up to where they would actually be able to dress out and so on and be in a position where there'd be safety under shelter is something that we've really looked at for that back road. So thank you again for hearing this tonight. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Okay, this petition or application will go to the Planning and Zoning Board for their September 24th meeting and can be back to the Board of Commissioners on October 14th. Did I say September 24th or October? September, okay. All right. David was laughing at me. Okay, the next item we have is zoning application 2019-702, BAPS Charlotte, to change the zoning from BDCD, BHCD, and I1CD to RICD on two parcels, one at the corner of Mount Harmony Church Road and Independence Commerce Drive, and one at 2050 Independence Commerce Drive, and being further identified as tax parcels 215, 094, 02, and 06. Mr. Camp.
All right, last public hearing for the evening. Here you'll see the zoning map indicating the location of the proposed new Baptist Temple in town. You can see there is currently conditional zoning on the property. It is bordered by the Team Church across Stevens Mill Road. This, of course, is the new Harmony Hills townhome development, and this is the former Hills Sand and Gravel site joining 74 at the on-ramp to 485. So just wanted to briefly orient everyone to the site. Again, we have here just an aerial that shows the site. It is primarily wooded today. It is adjoined, and the primary entrance to the site will be along Independence Commerce Drive. Just of note, the town maintains Independence Commerce from this point back to the cul-de-sac. Mount Harmony Church and Stevens Mill are both state-maintained roads. Just a street view showing the current conditions of the property. And here we have the proposed site plan. A couple of items to point out of note here. The applicant will be making several street improvements, including a curb and gutter along Mount Harmony Church, as well as sidewalk and the installation of street trees. There is sidewalk on Independence Commerce today. It is curbed and guttered as well. Street trees would be added there. Primary entrance will be along Independence Commerce. However, the applicant does propose a secondary drive access to the back of the site. As I understand it, that access would be gated most of the time except for during events. As I understand it, and according to the site plans, the maximum square footage allowed here would be approximately 90,000 square feet. And the applicant does have some additional detail on the inner workings of the temple that talk about circulation and kind of what their plan is for development. One item I do want to note here is that it's a little bit hard to see on these plans, but there are actually 3 access points on Independence Commerce Drive. I did get an update from our town engineer, and there was a request actually from our initial review with our development review team to remove one of these access points so that you do not have 3 along such a short span on Independence Commerce. So I just wanted to point that out while we're looking at the site plan. A couple of other proposed conditions. Trash pickup may only occur between 7 a.m. 7 p.m. and permitted uses simply limited to churches and places of worship. Going back to the map that you saw that depicted the current tree cover on the site, the applicant just meets the 15% tree save, which will create about 2.5% tree save. And sorry, I know nobody wants to go backwards, but tree save primarily along this portion of Mount Harmony. There's a kind of a thin tree save here, as well as a few smaller areas along the back side along Stevens Mill. We did ask the applicant to look at some additional tree save within the interior of the site, and this was shown on the revised plans. So just wanted to point that out. There are 2 stormwater facilities proposed for stormwater management. Land use plan didn't make specific recommendations for this site. The LUP does call for institutional uses as being appropriate at the I-485 and US 74 interchange. You know, if you'd asked me 5 or 10 years ago, I would have probably told you this site would most likely developed out with kind of non-residential uses, warehousing, manufacturing, just given the location close to the interstate. What we're really seeing is more demand now for institutional uses and housing. So that the neighborhood, it is developing to more of a neighborhood rather than a business location with the proximity to the highway. Just a few minor notes. We typically have more detail on the architectural aspect of the building in the conditional notes, so that is something that we'd like to see the applicant iron out. And just one note I had, we want to ensure that the driveway to Stevens Mill, that those gates are open during those high volume events, because we want to make sure that traffic is properly mitigated when you've got 300 or 400 vehicles arriving for a large worship service. So I know that was fairly brief, but just wanted to go through those items and happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Camp? Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Jay, I just wanted to confirm, and based on your submittal here that you've included, do you still not have architectural notes or renderings of any type from the applicant?
There is a kind of a massing model that's been provided that was part of the community meeting notes. I don't know if you've all seen those or not, that shows the general mass of the building, but nothing specific to materials that really fleshes out a little bit of what the structure would look like. I know that that is something that is a work in progress, and they've been updating us as they move along with that process.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Any questions? Oh, Mr. Corey?
Yeah. Jay, excuse me. I hope they understand that the drawings that we were given originally or shown are not pictorial enough to where you can really tell, where I could really tell what's going on. And I've sent word back too that they needed to do better on that. And they really need to get that to us as soon as they can if this thing's going to proceed.
Right. And I know that of course, the applicant has their presentation that will come before you. You always have the opportunity to continue the hearing if you're not comfortable with where we're at on any aspect of the zoning. Just keep that in mind as we have the hearing this evening.
Okay. Any questions from the Planning and Zoning Board? Okay. I guess we're ready for the petitioner.
How are you? How are you doing? Good. You're all set. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, I'm Ty Schaefer at Robinson Bradshaw. We're happy to represent BAPS and to discuss this request with you tonight. Thanks to Jay for his report. We'll continue to work with staff on the comments that we've received so far. I'm sure you all know BAPS, a current Matthews resident, but would like to give them an opportunity to speak to you tonight as part of this hearing. Nick Patel is here. We'll tell you a little bit about the BAPS community, their operations on the site, what they plan for this location. Jordan Noblin with Block Design is here. We'll go over the site plan and answer any questions you have about that as well. We also have Sweekar Gadia, who is with Cluck Design, the architects working on the project. He's going to show you a massing model we have in progress, answer questions you have about materials. They are planning something unique for this site and are continuing to work on getting to the point where they're comfortable with something that they can show you all as well to discuss with you. So we'll continue to move along on that front. I don't want to cover too much of the same ground in the interest of the hour, but it's two parcels, about 13.5 acres total, located off of Independence Commerce Drive, which is a public road between Mount Harmony Church and Stevens Mill Road. Currently a mixture of zonings for the site, a small piece of it, I-1, conditional highway business on the frontage of Mount Harmony Church Road, and distributive business for the bulk of the site. The site currently is approved for that portion for development of up to 5 buildings and 150,000 square feet of uses that would be allowed in the BD zoning district. So what is being requested here is a less intensive use for the site would be RI conditional, and primary condition, of course, would be that the only use permitted on the site is going to be the temple. Incidental and accessory uses that would accompany that: fellowship hall, recreation area, cafeteria for meals, classrooms. There's no request for a school. That would be for Sunday school type of activities. I'm going to go ahead and ask Nick Patel to come give a little bit of background for you all about the organization, because I think understanding the organization, the way their services operate, will help kind of as you're thinking through questions about how the site is used and the intensity of what they're going to do on the site.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Ty. So our organization...
Can you state your name?
My name is Nick Patel, and I'm with the BAPS Charlotte organization. So for our organization, I mean, we've been around since 1907, over 100 years, and globally we have over 1,100 locations, temple-wise and facilities, and we're truly a nonprofit social religious organization. And in the Southeast only, we have over 27 centers. Out of Carolinas, the 2 Carolinas put together, South and North, we have about 7 centers. And we've been in Matthews for over 22 years now at 4100 Margaret Wallace, where our current facility is. And we're getting to a point with the growth of our members. We're just kind of outgrowing the facility, and we're trying to look for our new land and build something from ground up. So, given our Southeast region, we're getting the opportunity to kind of build from ground up, and a lot of our facilities are not from ground up construction. So we're definitely trying to do something very unique, something attractive. And you're welcome to visit our website where you see our global network and all the facilities that we have. Along with that, being in Matthews for 22 years, our goal was to stay within Matthews, and this land came to us, you know, and we're looking to really develop something unique for our members. Currently, so also, I guess, more on the operation side, I guess, which was a lot of the concern for a lot of residents and business. Currently, our operation is Sunday to Sunday. So from a traffic perspective, it's a staggered influx of when we start our service. There's various activities that start on Sunday, which starts from anywhere from 10 a.m. And it goes on throughout the day. So there's like, you know, about 20, 30 cars coming in at 10 o'clock, and then another few 30, 50 at 12 o'clock, and then so on and so forth. Altogether, our day kind of ends and wraps up around 8 o'clock. So there's also the staggered departure as well. So traffic is initially outside of the business hours, and our New Year's and Diwali, which is coming up in October here, which if it does fall during a weekday, again, when we celebrate it, because all of our volunteers do have a full-time job in businesses, so our events are mainly held after business hours to accommodate everyone's time. So again, the traffic influx for a majority of our 99.9% of our activities are always outside of business hours. So just kind of keeping that in mind. With that being said, I'll turn it over to our block engineer, Jordan.
Jordan Albin, block design, landscape architect. Mr. Mayor, commissioners, staff, planning board, thank you guys for being here. Wanted to briefly discuss with you guys the site plan. As you can see, we have, again, entry off of Stevens Mill Road, and as Jay alluded to in his presentation, the majority of traffic will access the site via Mount Harmony Church and then Independence Commerce through this cul-de-sac and then into the site. Sweetcar can touch on this a little bit more when he speaks, but the importance and significance of that east-west connection and that entry drive into the site really is the main reason for why it is set where it is and the site is laid out as it is. Again, that's a culturally significant piece and part of the design. So again, as Jay also alluded to, additionally we will have streetscape plantings along Mount Harmony Church, Independence Commerce, as well as Stevens Mill. Again, the primary entrance will be off of Independence Commerce, and the gated part of Stevens Mill, which would really just be for the heavy inflow and outflow of traffic, so that could be controlled during the week to keep folks that were not associated with the temple, keep them from being on site and just for controlled access. Again, as you guys can see, we have stormwater ponds, the open space and tree save requirements of 15% minimum, which again, as Jay said, was about 2.5 acres. We would like to add more, but just because of site constraints and the topography from the top of the site at Stevens Mill all the way down to Independence Commerce is about 60 feet of fall. So it's a very significant grade change, and unfortunately, just because of how it laid in and the grading is going to be performed without having the ability to replant like they have in Charlotte, where you can replant trees as tree save. This is kind of where we landed in our tree save. So if you guys have any other thoughts, I'll turn it over to Sweetcar.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sweetcar Gadia. I represent Cluck Design. We're the architects and designers. Also, to mention, I am part of BAPS organization, so to me this project is even more special. I get to work on it day in and day out, so it's very exciting. The project currently is, it represents in its entirety the spiritual values and ideas of the organization, and we've tried very hard to maintain that into the architecture. I know everyone's wondering what this is going to look like, and we are wondering as well. And we are working diligently to create something beautiful for the community, but also for our congregation, and having something that we can take pride in, and also offer something to the community that can be a landmark. Currently, this is a massing model study that we have been working to support our planning efforts. We're currently heavily invested our time into really refining the floor plan and the programming efforts behind the layout. It's a very complicated set of plans with a lot of requirements from the owners. So most of our effort has been to coordinate with site and do a lot of planning. But that said, we do want to make sure that everyone has a visual understanding of what our projected aesthetics are. I know this doesn't give you a lot about the materials, but we have been strict to do our research and only offer up materials that are going to add value. So that includes precious stones, masonry. We're going to be looking at natural wood where we can, and also providing metal panels that are finished in quality but not corrugated metal panels. And then with the traditional architecture, that's a unique challenge in itself, where we want to represent something that is similar to the BAPS projects that are throughout the region. This is a facility in Atlanta that is way more grander than the Charlotte facility, but this is the benchmark for us, where we want to create a public space that is inviting, welcoming, and respects the materiality and the traditions and architecture of Hinduism. And so we are trying to emulate these architectural elements into our design, and therefore we were suggesting forms that are representative of that. And we're still in R&D of what material to really use to represent these traditional Indian architecture elements, but sure to say we are going to be looking at materials that are long-term in use and are not corrosive or doesn't, support the architecture and the design intention. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer them.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Melton?
Thank you, Mayor. And this is for the petitioner. You're only saving 15.7%, which in my understanding is the bare minimum. I'd like to see you investigate or look into the opportunity of saving at least 20% of the trees in the area and making that a part of your plan. And even if it meant, I'm one of 7, as we often say, but my opinion is before we close the public hearing, I would like to have renderings, elevations, a final architectural plan to enter into the public record as a part of the public hearing before it's closed. And if that means extending this another cycle, that's fine with me, but I certainly don't feel comfortable closing this public hearing without having something as a part of the application that's an example of what you're going to build.
Okay. Mr. Urban? Okay.
I will definitely echo Commissioner Melton's points on the architecture. We typically always ask for elevations. There are some cases where we would approve it pending elevations, but I think this is so sophisticated that we probably don't want to let that go too far down that path. So I will reiterate what Commissioner Melton had indicated. I do have a few items. He did talk about the tree canopy aspect of it, and realizing a 60-foot topo is extremely challenging. So unless you're going to step the building or put a funulator, or what do they call that vertical train, what my suggestion would be is to add back to the canopy through root plantings. Look at means and methods in which to, you've got that whole curved back side of the building, which you could do some heavily plantings in there. I think we need to be good stewards in the fact that we need to be doing the replanting effort as much as possible. We talked about the elevation notes, then we can get into a little bit more detail. So I think we're going to have a deep discussion about continuing the public hearing here. I have a concern about the wear and tear on Commerce Drive with all the vehicular traffic. I'd like to have CJ, our Public Works Director, sort of weigh into that. I don't know what the specs were for that road when it was built, so I'd like to sort of have that evaluated. I do have a out-of-the-box question. What happens to the old property?
Yeah, so the plan is to sell that property.
That's what I wanted to hear. Hopefully you'll hear sell it to a commercial operation or housing or something like that where we can get on the tax toll, because I'm concerned about one nonprofit moving to another nonprofit, holding on to the nonprofit property and not losing the tax value. One of the last things I wanted to do is I received a letter from the adjacent property owner on September 6, 2019. I since passed that letter along to John Carmichael, and it stipulates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what I thought were really excellent points about parking, construction entrance. It goes on to talk about employees, parking on the construction site, rear entrance off of Stevens Mill, and so on. I'd like that letter to be responded to and, for all intents and purposes, incorporated into the petition notes as we work through this process. So again, this may also be a cause for delay in extending the public hearing, because I think it's also prudent that the planning board is brought up to speed on this letter as well from the adjacent property owner. And let me just check my notes. So we talked about tree save, talked about getting that up, talked about elevations that Commissioner Melton talked about, the letter, the old property, and then the road wear and tear. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Sure.
Yeah, just have a discussion. I'll take them in reverse order. So I think we can, the letter, we've received a copy of that. We've looked at it. We're discussing it internally. We'll continue to work with Jay and staff on how we can respond to those points. I think they fall into two buckets.
Yes.
And one of them deals with kind of ordinary operational use of the site after it's been developed, use by the owner, and the other, I think, deals specifically with construction issues primarily. On the former, you know, I think you heard from Mr. Patel, and we discussed some of this throughout the presentation, that really this is a less intensive use than what currently is approved on the site. Concentration almost exclusively of those activities for weekends and after-hour time periods. So we think the more we look at this and have discussions with the neighbor, we think we can get people comfortable with the fact that there's not going to be significant demand on the road during the kind of weekday hours that, like the current approved use, for example, might present. But I think there are things we can do through use of the second gate, the second entrance, the gated entrance for any events to help control traffic flow. I know for those rare events that do fall on the week, like Diwali, for example, things that are calendar-based, they're using off-duty police officers to help control traffic, haven't run into issues with the flow out of their existing site, where I think almost everybody's turning left on to Margaret Wallace. So they definitely have some tried and practiced ways to make sure they mitigate their impact on neighbors. We'll continue to work through that. Construction, there are just some challenges, I think, with the site topography in terms of the ability to locate different entrances for construction purposes. Certainly everybody wants to get construction parking on the site as quickly as reasonably possible, not only for the neighbors' concern, but I think for their concern as they're trying to develop the site. So we'll continue to talk about if there are creative ways that we can respond to that, and we hear that concern. Elevations, again, you know, we're working on that. They want to be in a position where they're comfortable that what they're planning for the site is consistent with their mission, their values, and we certainly will push that along as much as we can. Tree save point is well taken. You know, we had explored the possibility of adding some additional tree save area close to the building envelope, but the grading that would have to be done, given the topography on the site, meant that there wasn't an opportunity there to save extra area. But replantings is certainly something that we can go back and talk about, and you know, to do so in a way that's consistent with your desire to have native plantings and the like. So we'll talk about those. Yeah, sorry for being so long-winded.
The less intense doesn't bother me, obviously, but you have no idea what I'd be doing to someone coming with a more intense situation. So you get equal drummings from me from that aspect of it. I know of Cluck Design. I expect to have my socks knocked off from that aspect of it, and so I know if I want more trees and more tree canopy, they will find a means and method, and that goes from there, from that standpoint. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Query?
Yes. And I'm not sure whether we talked to John about it, John Carmichael, but I did mention to somebody. I would like for you to go back and consider making this a taxable piece of property in some form or fashion, We've had 2 or 3 other nonprofits that have done that recently, which takes the burden off the citizens of Matthews to cover the whole tax burden for that particular piece. And it's a very large piece and an industrial piece, which is highly taxable for our purposes. So we'd like for you to at least consider that. And I would suggest that we do something to move this thing forward, because what you've got here is not enough for me to even start considering approving or disproving or anything. It's just not enough there. And I told John that too. And so that's kind of like generic. You could change anything in there. We'd never know what's changed. We need to know what it is. And BAPS has been a good citizen for a lot of years. And I was on this board when they built the current place. They've done a good job working with us then and during the years, and I anticipate that. But I would strongly recommend that you